Overlooking the small city of Zuzax lies a mountain with lush trees at its peak and down its backside, with the front of the mountain having more of a rocky, barren terrain. Weather was mostly sunny, with some storm clouds beginning to build up in the distance. At the edge of the city and the base of this mountain's front side was an insurrectionist camp. The camp occupied some old leftover buildings from the city's origins. About a full mile up the mountain, hidden behind two huge boulders looking down at this camp, was William and I. William's looking through his sniper scope and surveying the camp looking for our target, an insurrectionist leader by the name of Morsa. Morsa had been giving Oni quite the hassle in recent years. Somehow, she was obtaining information about Oni and their various classified projects. She would then antagonize Oni, stalling projects, and even compromising entire missions. Every time Oni tried to take her out, she just kept getting away, kept outsmarting them. This was the final straw, and they sent us to make it quick and clean. As William was surveying the camp for our target, he was also taking note of what supplies they had, what buildings or tents might house those supplies as well. This gave Oni and the UNSC information on what and how much the insurrectionists were scavenging and stealing from battlefields, bases, and supply routes. Just as William was taking note of where their armory seemed to be, he saw who he believed to be our target walking out of that same building talking to someone. Though William couldn't properly see her face, her hair and body proportions looked correct. Once the presumed target finished talking to that person, she seemed to stop for a moment, and then looked in William's general direction, as if she knew someone was watching her. Just as William was saying target confirmed, he grunted in pain, letting go of his sniper, and started to move frantically, even taking his helmet off to hold his head in his hand. As I'm trying to read William's suit vitals to get a better idea of what is happening to him, I hear a thunderous sound in the distance. I first took a quick glance at the dark clouds in the distance, automatically assuming the clouds were getting close and were going to overtake the sky soon. I went back and looked at Will, and my brain took that extra second to register what I saw in the sky. I quickly looked back at the sky, and a Covenant Corvette had just come out of slipspace in atmosphere of the planet. I quickly looked back at Will, and I grabbed his head, saying,
"You gotta snap out of it right now. Come on, come on."
He takes a moment to shake off and briefly process what he had seen. He looks up at me, and I say,
"You good?"
And he just replies, "Yeah." I then say,
"Great, because we have a Covenant Corvette coming into atmosphere."
He puts his helmet back on and just says, "Let's get to work then." At this point, the city of Zuzax has its alarm blaring. Phantoms have started to come down from the sky and attack the city. Gunfire started to fill the skies. The UNSC base AA turrets fired upon the Phantoms and then Banshees. 3 Phantoms split off and moved towards the insurrectionist outpost. These Phantoms would drop their soldiers off about 500 feet away from the front of the camp. William picks up his sniper and seems keen to find answers on what happened to him, but he seems even more keen to shoot something. We look down at the camp while making sure we have all of our supplies, and the insurrectionists are getting prepared for battle. Will and I look at each other, then we both jump the boulders we're behind and start a full sprint down the mountain. As well as sprinting, he does a small jump and knocks a medium-sized boulder out of its place to use it as a surfboard. As well as sliding, he begins firing sniper shots at some jackal snipers who were taking shots at the insurrectionists from afar. I began firing battle rifle shots at some elites, trying to assist the insurrectionists about to be engaged in battle. Once we got to the base of the mountain and into the insurrectionist camp, Will and I went our separate ways. William posted up in a tower that the insurrectionists made out of an old 2-story building. I turned invisible and made my way through a few alleyways this camp had and moved to the front lines. William had multiple insurrectionists around him, shooting out of other windows down at the Covenant. He didn't care who was next to him. He just wanted to get this over with, so that he could get to Morsa. My active camo ran out as I reached the front few buildings where the Covenant were pushing through. The insurrectionists had been holding their own pretty well, taking out grunts and some jackals. The elites, with their shielding, were giving them a hassle, though. They could focus fire on one elite and take it down, but that would mean other enemies would get closer. Mind you, this is 3 phantoms full of Covenant, and they're closing in fast. William was taking out bigger targets and any higher-ranking enemies he could see. As the Covenant breached the front barriers, I started to take out each enemy one by one with my shotgun, trying to keep the casualties to a minimum. I didn't think about it in the moment, but those coveys seemed to look different. They didn't seem to have much of a plan. Almost like they were just throwing their bodies at us. Now, while this was happening, Morsa was defending the armory and trying to get people to safety. She was equipped with an assault rifle, some grenades, and a magnum sitting in her right holster around her right thigh. She came out of the building to get more people cleared off the street when she saw me at the front, tossing a jackal over me and turning its head into grape jelly with my shotgun. She then saw an elite die right behind me from a sniper shot that came from behind her. She didn't think much of the shot as she knew her soldiers were in that building. She began pushing forward to the front line, taking out a few grunts, and even picked up an unarmed insurrectionist who had fallen to the ground out of pure terror. Morsa then lobbed a grenade out towards the open terrain that sat just outside the camp. The grenade exploded, taking out an elite and a jackal who were on approach. Morsa moved all the way up to the front building and behind the concrete barrier I was sitting behind as I was trying to recharge my shields and reload. She sat to the right with the connected building to my left. She asked me straight up if I was here to kill her. And I replied with,
Well, that's the mission. But honestly, I'm just here to babysit.
Just as I finished my sentence, an elite was about to come around the barrier on her side, and she moved to shoot at it. Just as they were about to meet, the elite was sniped in the neck, instantly falling against the barrier. The bullet then ricocheted off the barrier's corner and ripped through a jackal's torso. With what I just said, and the shot she just witnessed, she looked behind her and saw William in that second floor window. Immediately, she started walking in William's direction. Even through all the gunfire, explosions, yelling, his armor, she almost seemed to know who he was. Which was strange because William did not have friends back then. Now, here's some more backstory about Morsa that I found in her file a while later. She had been on the hunt for someone for decades at that point in her life. She had a son who was, healthy and vibrant, always loving to go outside and play. Each and every day after school, her son would want to play games with her or go outside and play with his friends. Normal children behavior, right? Well, seemingly out of nowhere, her son started to show signs of sickness and slowly began to die over the course of just a year. Her son ended up dying at just over age 7, but she couldn't come to terms with the fact that her son died, especially the way he did. She convinced herself that the child that died wasn't her son, No matter how many times relatives, friends, even doctors told her that her son was gone, it just couldn't register. She just couldn't believe them. It was only when she joined the insurrectionists that she found out about the Spartan program. She began to see the writing on the wall and the evidence piling up, eventually digging deeper and finding out just how horrible Oni and subsequently the UNSC truly was. Since she had found out what horrible experiments Oni were up to, she wanted to test a theory. The theory that her son was one of the Spartans, and if she poked the bear enough, Oni would send her own son to kill her. Going back to the battle, she went from almost an entranced walk to a full sprint, quickly making it into the 2-story building. She climbed the stairs, and as she reached the top, her eyes immediately looked at William, not paying attention to her soldiers around him. William pulled away from the window to reload and heard behind him, "Ma'am, you shouldn't be here." And he looked towards the sound, then at the woman who had just reached the top of the stairs. Just as he was going to pull his battle rifle on Morsa, he had another sharp pain in his head. This one lasted but a moment before he stopped. Instantly, William stood up and knew who this woman was. A rush of almost joy came over him. He told me later he saw glimpses of what seemed to be his childhood, that river walk, and heard the woman standing in front of him, calling him son. He couldn't bring himself to move to her, though, both out of nervousness and his brainwashing causing an internal fight within him. He just stood there frozen, while Morsa slowly walked towards William. Morsa touched his helmet with her hand and called him son, with her eyes beginning to tear up. Just then everyone heard a scream, and the Covenant had flanked around the side of the camp and was attacking unarmed insurrectionists. I was holding the front line best I could with the other armed insurrectionists, but it was only inevitable that the Covenant would break through. At that point, we had taken out a little over half the troops, but had also taken heavy losses. I yelled at William to start pulling his weight, because this place wasn't going to last much longer otherwise. William and Morsa were only able to have that one little moment before they had to get back in the fight. William finished reloading the sniper and started firing off shots again. Morsa ran down the stairs and ran a few buildings up to see if the armory was still protected, and it was, but barely. She told the last few insurrectionists guarding their armory to take what they could and get to safety. The armory was mostly barren by this point, the weapons, equipment, and ammo all being used in this battle. She then began clearing the buildings and making sure all her people were getting to safety. William at that point only had one sniper magazine left and decided to save it, opting to use his battle rifle to start getting up close and personal. He jumped out of the second floor, hitting the ground and rolling towards a grunt, which he promptly filled with lead. He moved to help any unarmed insurrectionists get to safety. He ended up making his way to me, and without even talking to each other, the two of us began to take out the Covenant forces just by ourselves. We were in the zone, and nothing could stop us. Our teamwork was unmatched. 2 brains operating as one. Alien blood splattered against the walls and ground like paint to a canvas. Bodies piled around us, creating an almost perfect ring that we were standing in. We tossed enemies to each other like a game of catch. It even took a chieftain down within a few dozen seconds. I thought it was strange they had a chieftain, but it wasn't completely uncommon for Covenant splinter groups. When the fight finally stopped, there were bodies from both sides lining the alleys and main dirt road. We'd won this fight, but at a big cost. Many insurrectionists escaped, and very few were left alive if they stayed. When I walked out to the main dirt road, looking around the camp for any more hostiles or people that needed help. Marissa walked out towards us from an alleyway after she had ordered her men away. As she was walking towards us, a smile came across her face, being able to see her son again. Looking back, I swear, I could tell William was trying to smile through his helmet, but he couldn't. He froze up. I pulled my battle rifle out and pointed it at Marissa, telling William to give me the word. I assumed William would, but he didn't. In fact, he put his hand on my battle rifle and pushed it down. I was confused and asked him what was up with him. He said, "Hold your fire," and I asked why. All he said was, "Mom." I was thoroughly confused at the time and simply said,
Excuse me? You wanted to kill her 10 minutes ago, and now she's your mom?
I then mumbled to myself,
You are so weird.
William almost didn't move at first. I saw him clench his fist and put his battle rifle on his back. William was still very robotic at this point, so it was strange to watch him have genuine human emotions. They began to both move towards each other to embrace. William took one slow step forward, taking in the moment. Just as I saw the shimmer, I pulled my battle rifle up at breakneck speed. I yelled at William,
Contact!
but I just wasn't fast enough. Behind Marissa, an energy sword activated, instantly impaling her and causing her to drop her assault rifle. I started firing shots into the elite's shoulder, making sure to avoid hitting Marissa. The elite began to step back, which caused it to pull the sword from Marissa's body. Instantly, Marissa turned around while falling, pulling the holstered pistol on her thigh to shoot the elite, getting in a few shots before hitting the ground. William, with a flip of a switch, began firing at the elite with his battle rifle as soon as his mom was released from the sword. The elite went down fast from the barrage of gunfire hitting it. However, William didn't stop firing at the elite, even when it hit the ground. He didn't even stop spamming the trigger when his magazine was empty. It wasn't until I came over to him and snapped him out of it. William had never shown that kind of pure rage in the years I had known him at that point. He snapped out of it, took a step back while looking at what he had done, the elite's body being completely mangled with how many bullets he put into it. William quickly rushed over to his mom, started to try and patch her up, even asking for my trauma kit. Hell, he almost grabbed my trauma kit. Marissa stopped him, though, grabbing his bicep and telling him not to waste what little supplies were left on her. Telling him it's okay. It's all going to be okay. Because this is what she wanted. All she wanted was to see her son again. William damn near ripped his helmet off, and Marissa started to cry. Touching her son's face for the first time in 37 years. Not a single word was said between them in that moment. Not a single word needed to be said. William began to tear up, but almost didn't know how to, due to him being so robotic. His face and body having an almost delayed reaction to the event unfolding in front of him. I just walked away, knowing that There were no more Covenant around. Just a few insurrectionist soldiers watching this happen. Even they turned away, knowing to give a mother and her son their one last moment together. William watched as his mother took her last breath, closing her eyes, but leaving a smile on her face and placing a small picture in his hand. A picture of Morsa and William at that riverwalk, smiling faces, and a reminder of what they once had. Just as William laid her down and stood up, it began to snow. He looked up at the sky, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath in, then out. He opened his eyes, looked at the picture, and then put the picture in a soft case for safekeeping. William walked over to me. I was just standing at the front of the camp, looking towards the city, which was still under attack. We looked at each other, and I leaned forward to look past him, tipped my head up real quick as to point out the warthog that was just on the other side of the building behind him. He looked at the warthog, looked back at me. He put his helmet on, and gave me a silent yes nod.